Okay, hello and welcome to Untitled Anarchist Channel Saturday night stream. Yeah, hello. Yes. Yes, I saw that the Muppets fucking, he's deleted his Twitter account. I was kind of curious how he was going to react to this. And I find it kind of, prescient by accident. It turns out the last talk he gave, his last video on YouTube, from apparently before this broke, was "A storm is coming." Um, yeah, apparently. So, gonna talk about that a bit. Gonna play some Geoguessr, and just the usual Saturday night thing around here. You missed the excitement earlier today. Well, no, you were there. You were there. I had like the most people I've ever had in my Duolingo speed run, and the fucking basement flooded, and I had to go shop back out tons of water, and then and then I came back, and everybody was gone, and there wasn't really time because I had to make. It's been an exciting sort of a day. How are you doing, Shakespeare? Oh, but the issue is that there's construction going on, and the gutter on the roof and back had to be taken down, and that means that rain is going down to just outside that wall, and it's got a couple of cracks. Uh, it's not as bad as it was the last time this happened because they're like doing some draping to move the water away from the building and everything. It's not great. It will be. At this point, just can't wait for that to end. Feel pain in the ass. Yeah, I mean it's nothing major though. Fortunately, I mean it's just in one area. And as we start out, yeah, I read the whole thing last night, that Medium post. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I've been thinking about it in terms of some things that I just kind of want to say to the people who came forward about this shit. It's like, it's complicated because the thing is, it's not like it was a great organization and it's being damaged by the fact, it isn't a situation where it's somebody who does good work and turns out to be an abusive fucker on the side. He doesn't do good work, and he's not a good person. Uh, and it's not a good organization to begin with. And so it's complicated on a certain level. But I mean, there are just a couple of things. Just I'd like, on the off chance that somebody who wrote one of those statements, or confirmed them, ever happens upon this. I mean, I know Muppet has shown up in my chat once, and he probably would have again, but I blocked him. But here's the thing. Here's the fundamental thing that I think comes down to as far as I'm before I go on, and it's this. From the statements, and all of them are entirely in agreement on this point. What we know is that what all of you say is that Caleb Maupin is the sort of person who will tell malicious lies about people he claims to consider comrades. He will tell such malicious lies to people he claims to consider comrades. And what I would like the people in his group, including the people who wrote that statement, to consider is that a guy who will tell malicious lies about people he claims to consider comrades will probably also be telling malicious lies about people he openly considers political adversaries. And that a person who is willing to lie to his comrades, the people he claims are his comrades, in order to keep them at odds with each other, might well be lying about all sorts of other shit. And I say might well, but the reality is. He's picked people, it's clear from the statements, and it's clear from just looking at his audiences in his videos. Because ever since he's had audiences to talk to, they all fit a certain type. They take a couple of boxes. They barely, I doubt, seem to be older than 25. I would imagine a lot of them are like barely 20. And they're probably quite inexperienced. And somebody like the sort of people who are likely to be dazzled by a guy who says he gave a speech at Occupy Wall Street. The kind of people who are likely to be dazzled by his suits and his junior high school principal routine. Dugan's daughter was killed. I saw something about Dugan, but no, I didn't hear that. Jesus, what's going on there? So, I mean, I don't know anything. I didn't even know he had a daughter. He's specifically choosing the sort of people who are least likely to be familiar with any of the stuff he's talking about, and least likely to feel confident saying, that's not what Marx said. That's not what communism is. Why are you hanging out with literal fascists like the LaRouche group and Dugan and all this? He's picking young, inexperienced, impressionable, and he's picking you because he can bullshit you all the much more easily. That's what this is about. His entire, it's not a good idea and a good organization that's gone wrong because of the like horrible fucking behavior of one leader. Everything about the organization is bullshit. That's what I want you to consider. If you, one of the people who signed that statement, who wrote those statements, ever happens upon this, that's the thing is that just people just need to consider. Bombing where did I didn't hear any of this stuff. Okay. And we are definitely in someplace German speaking. Hier bitte nicht parken. Elert und Söhne. Let's see if we've got some signs we can look at. Aber Grundstück wie zu vermieten. Dorbenstraße. Okay, that font isn't familiar. I mean, we can say that this isn't Vienna, and it isn't Berlin, and it isn't Munich. Because Munich has more of a Times New Romany font. But they didn't get Dugan, actually. I mean, I don't... Deutschland tankt auf. Okay, we are in Germany. Not in Austria. Definitely not in Switzerland. Zentrum, Horn, Bergedorf. A5. Hello, Adam. Well, yeah, I don't even really know exactly what to say about that. Okay, we're by Hanover and Bremen and near the A5. How are you doing, Adam? So apparently Dugin's daughter got killed by a car bomb is what we're just learning, or what I'm just learning anyway. A2, A7. Hildesheim, Wernigerode. Haha. Magdeburg, Halberstadt. Trying to remember where the A5 is, where the A5 Autobahn is. Because this town, with its lovely trading estate, and everything, it is on the A5. Elbbrücken. Okay. Bridges, it's by the Elbe. Oh no, it's not the A5. Valgedorf. Okay, here we go. It's by Hamburg. Sachsen. Okay, there we go. Not the A5 after all. $13 kilometers. I'm not bad. I had some excitement involving Duolingo speed runs and then having the basement flood. Okay, English. Green and rocky. Could be the Irish coast, could be the British coast. Dude. Okay, that sounds like it might actually be Welsh. Yeah, I mean, the name... Well, the coastline could be anywhere in Britain and Ireland. But this double D here, that is a Welsh thing. Even the very closely related... Okay, yellow number plates. We're definitely in Britain. Where remains to be seen? Isgraig. Okay, that sounds Welsh. Hello, Nwadiagwara, ¿cómo estáis? Yesterday, we did something a little bit different. So it ended up just being Spanish speakers on here and in chat. We were looking. Purt Treardir. Arwaini. Okay, we're in Wales. Okay. Sí, se inundó una parte del sótano. Por suerte no todo. No el sótano entero, sino una parte que ya se había inundado. Y por eso tuvimos ya trasladado gran parte de las cosas que hubiesen podido salir dañadas. Pero igual había que aspirar todo el agua. Igual. So yesterday we were looking actually at the party political broadcast for the referendum coming up on the constitution in Chile, and just basically how it is kind of a fight between right wingers. And I had run out of time just as the as we were going to get to the no vote. Winibdrosdro. Hanoid. Okay. I mean, this is coastal Wales. Defense, fire, and rescue. Okay, so we're near a military base. This is MOD Fire Department. So we're in Wales, on the coast, and we're near the someplace military. I mean, the last thing we saw was this actor from Argentina. Because they couldn't get any actors from Chile to participate in this stuff. Because, like, all the actors that anyone wants to watch don't want anything to do with the toxic brand of the honest right wing. The people who are right wing in Chile and honest about being it. So they had this guy from Argentina who's talking about how fucking horrible it is. How horrible it is in Argentina, and how horrible, like, that the rich people are leaving, and the rich people are getting richer, and something like that. And meanwhile, in Chile, what you have to know is lots of people go to Argentina, specifically to go to university, because they can't afford to do it in Chile. Argentina's next door, everybody knows Argentina. And as I said in Spanish then, like, if that's failure, what they've got in Argentina, Chile needs to fucking fail. Caergubi! We're in Holyhead, I've been here. This is a tiny town, this is gonna be really easy. This is where the ferries from Dublin go. Reardir Bay. Now, of course there's an MOD fire and rescue vehicle. There's an RAF base there. Enrincaru. Yeah, I mean, what they've been saying about indigenous people and the Constitution is it's going to be more like the US and Canada, which is like, that's not good. The fucking indigenous people are getting wrecked in the US and Canada. Porthavelin, Rangolai. I mean, if everybody actually understands Spanish in chat, we might just go ahead and do the rest of it. Holy... Okay, I have been here a million times. Danvaur, Brindglas. Lone Garrick Vour. Big Rock Lane. Sí, no tienen autonomía ni una weá, po. Lo que tienen es despojada su tierra. Tienen la tierra despojada, la plata que se gana con los recursos que existen bajo esa tierra están en manos del gobierno y de las empresas privadas y ellos no reciben ni un peso del agua. En Canadá, ni qué hablar, po. Uf. 345 meters, not bad. Yeah. Sí, sí, I mean, están cagados. Scania. We're traveling on the right side of the road, so Inkyu Denwa. But we're not in Japan. We are in Taiwan. I also got to introduce Noir Yaguara to the wonders of Trogdor. Because Noir was drawing a dragon, and it's like, well, there, and I just had to turn the seat around and sit down on it with the back of the seat. My arms folded on the back of the seat. So, you know, there was a guy once who talked about drawing dragons. His name was Strongpad. Gao Yun Long Tan. Yeah, we're in Taiwan. Gao Yun Long Tan. Yes. A great cultural product of the early internet. Yo todavía ni a Taiwán ni a la República Popular no, he tenido la oportunidad de ir. En Asia solo conozco Japón. Pasé un verano allá como estudiante de intercambio. Taoyuan, that's Gaoyuan. But how de eso hace chucha. Cuando fue el 95, así que son como 27 años. Taoyuan, Taoyuan.但是导演在哪儿？ Ah, hablas Tagalog. Puede van Macausa Tagalog. $25, 49.16. I know very, very little Tagalog. Hay queso en rebanada. Costilla de cerdo. Okay. I dated a woman from there a long time ago. And I learned some as a result of that, so I can say things like Mahal kita, Puede bang makausap si Grace Velázquez. Pero, ¿de qué partido? Centavo. Okay. 787. That is a North American number plan area code. The number is 7 digits. Could this be Puerto Rico? Papa. Me encantan las papas, weón. A ver, a ver. Okay. Senador Mayagüez Aguadilla. Aguadilla. Mayagüez. Okay, yeah, we're in Puerto Rico. Sí, yo tampoco. Yo tampoco. Y eso que la gente en los aviones ya no usa mascarilla, ya no usa barbija. Y sí, no estoy ni ahí con subir a un avión donde todos los hueones andan sin barbija. Y además, bueno, todo el tráfico aéreo está a la cagada porque las tripulaciones están enfermas y no tienen quien pilotea. 444. Ahí estamos. Ahí estamos. Aquí cerca, será. $4.1 kilometers, 49.86. Sí, po, me lo puedo imaginar. Yo que tengo dos sobrinas que van al colegio en un distrito escolar donde tienen prohibido exigir que la gente ocupe cubreboca. Ah, Burj Khalifa, yeah, we are the Dubai Mall, yeah. Estamos en Dubai. 7.9 kilometers. Not bad. 24,831. Wow, I am really. No me sorprendería para nada, porque no es más que Disneylandia para billonario, weón. No es nada más que una Disneylandia para los culiados más ricos, más ricachones del planeta. Weón, como Piñera, como Trump, como ese chuche su madre de Boris Johnson. Tanto weones que seems like there's a fair bit of Spanish being spoken here. Does anyone mind? I'm going to ask this in English. Does anyone mind if we continue with the rest of the propaganda for the plebiscite in Spanish, and the discussion would be in Spanish, but it will be but it's only like I think 5 minutes to go on that, and then we would move over and do something else. By the way, anyone who has missed what dropped about Caleb Maupin's bullshit think tank. I just want here's what people, the members are saying, the who've come and spoken out. Big ass content warning for all sorts of sexual assault, kind of sexual harassment and serious culty manipulation. But if you want to get caught up on what's going on with Caleb Muppet and why he's no longer on Twitter, here that is. Okay, well, in that case, we're gonna look at these are the second half of the party political broadcast, which is for the no vote. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just so many things that make sense when you know. I mean, I am like totally not surprised that he's got some kind of fucking school spanking kink, because it's just his entire fucking persona, and it's like that's like the most honest and authentic thing about him. If he were I mean, if he did not fucking manipulate women unknowingly to participate in it to get his fucking rocks off, and just was honest about it, and you know was honest in general, he'd be no worse than any fucking ML out there. But I mean, it is just fucked. Like, so big ass content warning on that. Okay. Okay. Por Fundación Centro de Política Mapuche. No, no tengo no he escuchado hablar ni una sola vez de esta Fundación Centro de Política Mapuche. Fundación Centro de Política Mapuche. ¿De quién es? Enama. Seria. Okay, they seem to be a group. Bueno, orientamos a facilitar el diálogo con las comunidades indígenas. Aportamos el diálogo intercultural. O sea, estamos ante una ONG que existe más bien para poder dirigirle propaganda mejor a los pueblos originarios.
La nueva constitución nos va a enfrentar entre chilenos indígenas y no indígenas. Queremos paz.
Ah, sí, las forestales quieren paz. ¿De qué paz me habla? Como de que, sí, la nueva constitución, hay que entenderlo, hay que saberlo, que no ha habido ningún enfrentamiento entre mapuche y el Estado chileno en los siglos de colonización que lleva esa parte del mundo. Solo recién con la nueva constitución se alza, surge la posibilidad que se dé un enfrentamiento en el territorio tan pacífico del Guaymapo, del que tradicionalmente se denomina macrozona sur. Sí, obvio, el enfrentamiento recién se va a dar con la nueva constitución. Los milicos están ahí tan solo para cocinar empanadas, weón. Yo quiero violencia, weón. Ya, la weón. Sí, weón.
Rechazamos.
Son... Eso es todo, weón. Franja ciudadana. Abogado por Chile. Apoderado Chile. Colectivo ciudadano. Rechazo ciudadano. Los Ríos. Rechazo por Chile. Ah, esos son los grupos. O sea, bueno, no van a estar criticando la constitución desde la izquierda. Eso sí lo podemos decir a ciencia cierta.
¿Quieres venir conmigo? Vamos todos unidos. Este 4 de septiembre elegimos un camino. Vamos sin rencor, vamos por una mejor.
Vamos por una mejor, weón.
La escrita con amor y nos volvemos a encontrar. Somos mayoría, contagiemos la alegría. Si votamos...
La alegría, weón. La alegría ya viene.
Vamos todos juntos, amanece un nuevo día.
Amanece un nuevo día. Primero, yo no soy astrofísica ni nada, pero yo me imagino que amanecerá un nuevo día, sea como sea el resultado de esa votación, weón. Tan solo porque la Tierra se mueve alrededor del puto Sol, weón. Tan solo por eso. Si rechazar no cambia nada. Están hablando como si rechazar lo cambiara todo. Rechazar no cambia ni una weá. Porque igual se estará siguiendo con la misma constitución de siempre, que también es una constitución de mierda. Es una constitución más mierda que la constitución de mierda que la cocina constituyente viene a proponerle a la gente. Ah, sí.
Vamos sin rencor, vamos por una mejor.
Sí, y toda esa actitud sin rencor, por la paz, así se puede saber. 1312, Acab, traidor, Paco traidor. En tu linda franja de rechazo tenía una Acab, weón. Pero bueno, esa actitud de lo de la paz, sin rencor, y no habrá enfrentamiento, esa actitud es muy característica de un sector que en Chile se denomina cuico. Gente rubia con plata que vive en como tres comunas. En Vitacura, en Lo Barnechea, que lo denomina Lo Pinochea, por motivos que serán obvios, y Las Condes. Y esos hueones son quienes siempre están hablando de la paz.
una escrita con amor y nos volvemos a encontrar. ¿Quieres venir conmigo?
Una escrito, ni siquiera una escrita con amor. ¿Una qué, weón? ¿Una carta?
Vamos todos unidos, este 4 de septiembre elegimos un camino. Esto
¿Qué letra de mierda, weón?
es sencillo, es ahora mis amigos. Si votamos todos juntos lograremos lo que digo. Vamos sin
¿Lograremos qué? ¿Que amanezca un nuevo día? Lamento tener que decirte que eso no es logro tuyo, weón.
rencor, vamos por una mejor, una escrita con amor
Las canciones de los fachos siempre son peores.
y nos volvemos a encontrar.
Una letra es peor incluso que un Chile ganador, un país ganador, la canción del sí en el 88.
Estamos listos con el dedo.
Quedó como nuevo, Doc.
No te conformes. Si está mala, está mala.
Rechaza por una mejor, pero bueno, el problema es que fundamentalmente, sí, es una constitución de mierda que no cumple con ninguna de las demandas populares que levantan desde hace años, que tanta sangre se ha derramado en la calle para avanzar. Pero votando rechazo tampoco va a salir una constitución mejor. Para que salga una constitución buena. Y eso que yo critico mucho los límites del constitucionalismo porque es en su forma izquierdista, porque al final es muy inconsecuente todo. Pero la única forma en que se dé algo mejor, va a ser que se le echa al bolsillo toda esa constituyente patronal, toda esa clase política, y se parte desde cero con, con el asambleísmo que tanta pera le da a la clase dirigente en Chile. No por nada, no hubo opción asamblea constituyente territorial y soberana en el plebiscito de entrada, porque esa es la weá que el más miedo le da a la clase dominante, porque esa es la forma deliberativa que ellos no saben controlar, porque ahí son una minoría chiquitita, mientras que en la constituyente patronal, la convención, la flamante mierda de esa convención, son mayoría. Se trata de una constitución no escrita por Pinochet que preserva lo esencial de la constitución sí escrita por Pinochet. Es una constitución que reivindique un neoliberalismo progre.
Ya, señora, me quedó lista la filtración.
¡Buenísimo!
No te conformes. Si está mala, está mala.
Resignación.
Frustración, ansia y pena.
Soy de origen biólogo.
Sí, porque lo que pasa es que hay unas demandas populares muy concretas que se llevan años levantando en la calle. Primero, educación gratuita, pública, laica, para el pueblo entero, desde jardín infantil hasta el doctorado. Segundo, fin al lucro con la estafa de las pensiones privatizadas de las AFP. Expropiación de toda la gran minería para que la plata que se genera con la minería del cobre, del litio, del molibdeno, etcétera, se ocupe para financiar programa para mejorar la vida del pueblo. Y esas son las cosas que... Sí. Y esas son las cosas que se llevan años demandando, exigiendo en la calle. Y ya que esta constitución bueno, nace de un proceso diseñado por Piñera y su comisión técnica llena de representantes de las empresas multinacionales y del imperialismo, incluso en la consultoría de Madeleine Albright tenía representación en esa wea. Lo que pasa es que se adoptó una ley, la ley 21.200. Y esa ley, en su artículo 135, dice que la convención constitucional no puede cuestionar los tratados de libre comercio, las sentencias judiciales firme ejecutoriada, no puede cambiar en lo fundamental la forma del Estado tampoco. Y lo que pasa es que no hay manera de hacer todas las cosas que la gente lleva años exigiendo en la calle sin derogar los TLC, porque los TLC que protegen la inversión extranjera, la, blindan la privatización de todos los servicios públicos, de la educación, de la minería, del transporte, de las carreteras, la telefonía, de todo. No se puede ir nacionalizando esas cosas para sacar el lucro de la wea, para que sean gratuitas y públicas, eso, sin cuestionar los TLC. Pero esa constitución no puede, porque tiene que atenerse a la normativa en que desde la cual fue creada la instancia en la que fue deliberada, y es el problema. Así que al final el modelo y lo fundamental no se toca. Es el problema fundamental de la UA.
Marino.
Soy indígena, nací en la falda del Icancadur, el volcán más alto y la fortaleza San Pedro de Atacama.
Soy abogada y estudié en la Universidad de Chile, donde fui dirigente estudiantil muchos años.
Por las mismas razones fundamentales.
Cabe decir que la Universidad de Chile es una de las universidades privadas más caras del país. Es como Harvard.
Por las cuales luché y trabajé contra la dictadura y por recuperar la democracia, son las mismas razones que hoy me sostienen en el propósito de rechazar.
La ley tiene que ser una sola ley para todos los chilenos.
Rechazar no significa abandonar.
O sea, la ley tiene que ser una sola. Ahí se trata de que hay unas disposiciones muy chantas, muy vagas, que hablan de una supuesta autonomía territorial de los pueblos originarios, pero solo en sus territorios tradicionales. ¿Cuáles son esos territorios tradicionales? Nadie lo sabe, no está escrito. Eso al final lo va a decidir el Estado. Así que la idea de la autonomía territorial sería una mejoría si es que fuera definida de alguna forma muy clara y dentro de la Constitución. Pero en realidad, bueno, es una weá que no va a llevar a ninguna parte, porque no se basa, porque ese concepto de los territorios tradicionales no sirve. Todo el país es un territorio tradicional de algún pueblo originario.
La tarea de una buena nueva constitución.
No reconoce la igualdad ante la ley.
Sí, reconoce la igualdad ante la ley. Eso sí, la igualdad ante la ley dentro de una lógica mercantil, neoliberal, capitalista. O sea, es una igualdad formal, que, al igual que la constitución actual, que también reconoce esa igualdad formal, pero que al final, desemboca en una desigualdad real.
Y si no somos iguales ante la ley, ¿qué qué clase de unidad como nación vamos a tener.
No se enfocó realmente en satisfacer las necesidades que legítimamente manifestó la gente.
Queremos elegir
Las necesidades que legítimamente manifestó. O sea, no se trata de todas las necesidades, sino las que este cuico estima legítimas.
el colegio de nuestros hijos, la salud, el lugar donde trabajamos. Queremos ser dueños de nuestras casas, de nuestra pensión y de nuestras vidas.
Sí, primero, es decir, ¿cómo ser dueño? ¿Creen la idea que supuestamente la nueva constitución le va a quitar la casa a la gente? Es una wea que viene siendo la ultraderecha Cerato ya. Pero obviamente no, la propiedad privada es más que protegida en esta weá. Obvio, porque están blindados los tratados de libre comercio. ¿Cómo van a no estar protegida la propiedad privada si se está blindando los TLC? Y la idea de que la gente hoy sería dueña de las previsiones es una ilusión, es un mito. Al final, Wall Street es dueño de esas previsiones.
Ricardo Vilca Solís y mi familia, que somos 73, indígenas alicantay, votaremos rechazo.
Rechazar es también una tarea y una forma de esperanza,
Fe.
Una
fraternidad.
Donde solamente existe el amor.
mira esa casa, huevón. Yo he estado varias veces en San Miguel, en Santiago, donde está, bueno, una cárcel de muy mala fama, porque murieron, antes fue la cárcel, bueno, de los condenados jóvenes. Y ahí murieron como 80 jóvenes en un incendio provocado porque, bueno, no se hace nada por asegurar la seguridad de esos cabros. Y ahora es una cárcel de mujeres. Pero te digo, la mayor parte de la gente en San Miguel no vive en weas así, casa tan nueva, mira. Mira las lámparas que tiene la wea. Abogada en San Miguel, bueno, abogada con plata además. Obvio que no está en la Defensoría Popular, po. Gente con plata leyendo. Y bueno, ok, vemos a una mujer leyendo que tiene claro harto tiempo libre, bueno, para ella, pero va a decir algo. ¿Solo va a ser que está leyendo todo el rato o qué? Pucha, tiene harto tiempo libre, po.
No.
Esta propuesta de constitución está mal hecha porque está con la emoción equivocada. Ah, sí. Ahora va a ser que, bueno, será lo mismo que siempre dicen los cuicos, que, que la gente es resentida, que los pobres son llenos de odio, weón. Ah, sí, eso es lo que va a hacer.
La rabia.
Weón, ¿cómo no sentir rabia, weón? ¿Cómo no sentir rabia cuando hay todo un estado que está dedicado a cagarte, a sacar toda la riqueza del país, regalársela a cuico de otros países y cuico interno, weón. ¿Cómo sentir rabia en un país donde existe un cuerpo de infantería mal llamada policía civil, que existe tan solo para torturar y matar a quien se levanta contra toda la indignidad de la vida que dentro de ese estado, weón? La rabia, sí, la rabia para los cuicos es cosa mala, porque ¿cómo sentir rabia? Yo he estado en Las Condes, yo lo entiendo de alguna forma. Esos weones, los únicos problemas que tienen es que de vez en cuando su nana se muere por COVID y tienen que buscar otra, weón. Ya, weón.
Todo lo oscurece. Un llanto con rabia es desesperación. Un liderazgo con rabia es abuso. Una mente con rabia
Pero los grandes acuerdos los vamos a poner nosotros. Y que quede claro.
se nubla. Un recuerdo con rabia es rencor.
Weón. Sí. Que la wea mala, weón. Solo, sí. Claro, porque los fachos, lo único que han hecho es repartir el amor, weón. Van por todas partes repartiendo pase amor.
Una causa con rabia es violencia. Pensar con rabia
Una causa con rabia es violencia. Bueno, el Estado es violencia, pero no es rabioso. La violencia, bueno, el- esos hueones son tan desconectados de la realidad cotidiana de la gente que no entiendan que es posible sentir rabia ante la violencia cotidiana que existe. La violencia que hace que solo en la parte más rubia de Santiago haya árboles por todas partes, sea súper verde por todas partes, weón. Eh, Mientras que en otra parte de la ciudad, en la mayor parte de la ciudad, todo está a la cagada, weón. Obvio que hay rabia. La rabia es más que justificada, pero estos weones viven en una burbuja. Viven en una burbuja donde ni siquiera alcanza el metro, weón. Y por eso cuando van bajando y ven que la gente se libra batalla callejera con los pacos, ¿viste? ¿Por qué tanta rabia? Oye, Susana, tráigame más martini, conche tu madre, perezosa. ¿Por qué tanta rabia? Explíquemelo, Susana, para eso te estoy pagando. No, señora, me está pagando usted para traerte estos martini. No, weón. Tú, Susana, eres mi intérprete para la gente, para interpretar lo que dice la gente normal. ¿Por qué tiene tanta rabia? Si te digo, me despide. Si les... Conche su madre. Son muy... Sí, son argumentos emocionales, pero argumentos emocionales desde la ñaicidad, desde la apatía, desde una apatía que solo puede existir en una mente que no tiene que vivir, que vive en el lado cómodo de tanta violencia, de tanta desigualdad.
Conveniente que ellos ahora también sufran un poquitito.
es odiar. Una respuesta con rabia es venganza. Y un sueño escrito con rabia
Un sueño escrito.
es una pesadilla.
Depende.
Otra cosa es el amor.
Sí, el amor de Piñera, de Chadwick, del choclo de Élano. Sí, 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 porque incluso viven tan emburbujados que tienen su propio acento dentro de una misma ciudad.
Abrazar con amor es contener.
Y abrazar con rabia y contener. Abrazar con amor es contener. ¿Contener qué, weón? ¿Órganos internos? ¿Contener qué? Abrazar con amor. Un abrazo con amor es continencia, weón. Abrazar con rabia es mear por todas partes o qué.
Enseñar con amor es educar. Un techo con amor es hogar.
Un techo con o sin amor es techo, weón.
Un grupo con amor es equipo. Un acuerdo con amor es compromiso.
Así, un matrimonio, weón. Qué buena, un matrimonio. La gente tiene que casarse con los cuicos. Pero no, porque un matrimonio tiene la división de bienes, weón. La condivisión de bienes. O sea, si la gente se casa con los cuicos, como dice esta metáfora, eso significa que todo el mundo va a ser propietario de lo que tienen hoy los cuicos como su reserva, su reducto exclusivo, weón.
Proteger con amor es cuidar.
Vender la pomada con amor es propagandizar.
Un trabajo con amor es orgullo. Un derecho con amor es equidad.
Un derecho con amor, weón. Un derecho, weón.
Un rechazo con amor es una nueva oportunidad. Y un sueño escrito con amor es lo que todos queremos.
Todo quiere.
Por una constitución escrita con amor.
Por amor de mierda, weón. Pues sí, por amor de plata. Ese es el amor que conoce esta gente, weón. El amor a la plata, el amor al privilegio, el amor a que lo único pobre que conozcan su gente que viene a su casa a hacer la limpieza, weón, a hacer el aseo. Eso es lo que aman.
Rechaza por una mejor.
Los canales de televisión transmitieron la franja televisiva correspondiente al plebiscito constitucional, según lo acordado por el Consejo Nacional de Televisión.
Okay, and that is the end. And what we learned a valuable thing, which is that that rich people in Chile live in a fucking bubble, and that even the fucking revolt, even the uprising, was not capable of helping them actually even recognize what's going on around them. Jesus Christ. I mean, this is the same bullshit. It's like, do you remember that song, Guayaguara? Que no pasa Chile? When it's all cuicos singing. It's singing in favor of peace. It's like, the military police are like shooting people's fucking eyes out. Okay. So we've got about a half an hour left to go, so let's see what else we can look at. Okay, there's Is America Doomed with Foch? There's the banning of sex pest grifter asshole Andrew Tate, who apparently the right wing is really like. Yeah, they're angry about. I didn't know that he was like political. I thought he was just a regular fucking grifter. I mean, this is a guy who openly admits that his whole thing is sexually manipulating women into that he tries to manipulate women into going into porno and making him lots of money. That's his whole thing, and apparently PragerU is angry about this. We've got a short video where PragerU asks whether Israel is an apartheid state, and I'm sure that's going to get a very fact-based treatment. We've got a storm is coming. Caleb Maupin speaks to CBI Chicago conference not knowing what kind of storm is actually in store for him. And so has anyone got any particular preferences? Oh, there's also the student loan forgiveness scam by PragerU. And Charlie Kirk and Vosh on Tim Pool's fucking show. That seems like there's all sorts of stuff we could look at. If anyone has any particular preferences, just let me know. And I'm sure we can. Oh.
Chile, tierra de amor, de esperanza y de unión.
Eso es lo que vamos a ver.
¿Qué nos pasa, Chile?
¿Qué le pasa a Chile?
Hoy por mi país quiero cantar, luchar por mis derechos, pero
con tranquilidad, weón.
Y aquellos que el terror quieren sembrar.
Sí, el terror son las barricadas, weón. No son los guanacos, no son las escopetas de los pacos, weón. Son las barricadas.
Que me puedan escuchar.
Bueno, no quiero que te exprese, no quiero escucharte. ¿Por qué tan distanciado de la paz, weón?
La dignidad, confío en que las cosas cambiarán. La fuerza que nos une.
Es Don Francisco, un weón que siempre me hace desear que los judíos tuviéramos la excomunión, porque siempre que sale ese weón en la pantalla, sé que va a venir alguna wea antisemita, porque ese chuche su madre, además de chuche su madre, es judío. Y siempre hay algún chuche su madre antisemita, que en vez de putearlo por chuche su madre, lo putea por judío. Y entonces yo tengo que preguntarme... sí. Sí, como en Dichato, el gran triunfo de Dichato, weón.
¿Qué nos pasa, Chile? Vas a desangrar. Fuera la violencia. Viva la unidad. ¿Qué nos
pasa, Chile? Basta de weá.
Soy en nuestras voces. Todos por la paz.
Hoy alzo mi voz y quiero hablar.
Yo incluso escribí una parodia.
Por mi futuro, por
Mutilado sin cesar. Los pacos nos balean al azar. Y vos te corrí paja por la paz. La blanca paloma incluso. Sí, es cierto.
Vas a desangrar. Fuera la violencia.
Cuando Hinspeter también hubo harto. Así, hacía tantas cosas terribles. Los huevones lo andaban puteando por judío en vez de putearlo por las cosas que hacía, weón.
Viva la unidad. ¿Qué nos pasa, Chile? Vas a desangrar. Soy en nuestras voces. Todos por la paz.
Weón, lo que... Todo por la paz... Que yo conozco el video de que sacaron esa toma ahí. Un video de Piensa Prensa o Prensa Opal, no me acuerdo. Que dice, recrudece la represión policial en la Plaza de la Dignidad. Y en ese momento es lo que se está mostrando. Toda la gente reunida pacíficamente. Y lo Paco entonces abren el fuego y todo el mundo tiene que echar a correr. Pero van a cooptar esa imagen para su propaganda facha. Yo en la Conde tengo muy buena vista.
Tiempo nuevo para todos llegará.
Mi tierra es de esperanza y de bondad. Juntemos nuestras manos para ti
¿Qué nos pasa, Chile?
Chucha, tanta rubieza también.
Vas a desangrar. Fuera la violencia. Viva la unidad. ¿Qué nos pasa, Chile? Vas a desangrar.
Me duele el cerebro, weón. Eso que el cerebro no tiene los receptores, que se supone que no debe doler, pero a mí me duele el cerebro.
Viva la unidad. Todos juntos con pasión gritamos viva Chile. Todos por la paz. Todos juntos con pasión gritamos viva Chile. Viva la unidad. Todos juntos con pasión gritamos viva Chile.
Esta...
Todos por la paz.
me duele, weón. Okay, so that is ¿Qué nos pasa, Chile?
¿Qué nos pasa, Chile? Vas a desangrar. Fuera la violencia. Viva la unidad. ¿Qué nos pasa, Chile? Vas a desangrar. Soy en nuestras voces.
Lamentablemente sí, se oyeron sus voces. Okay, I gotta get away from that. That was painful the first time I saw it, but... God, I mean, that is like mega... You could put that on an LRAD. Okay. And just the force of the cringe would disperse protests. The sheer force of the cringe. Okay.
Fragmentation of the Palestinian society and the dispossession of their lands are key pillars of Israel's apartheid system to maintain domination and control. But there's more.
Okay, that's accurate. And that's actually more accuracy than I expected. How are they going to deal with the fact that a fucking mainstream human rights organization... No, sí, exclamaciones, sí, yeah, I mean, how are they going to deal with the fact it's just the most mainstream human rights organizations around are now saying this?
The unequal structure of nationality and status, restrictions on freedom of movement, use of military rule, denial of right to political participation or the right to peaceful protest, and cruel separation of families all add to the complex system that we see today.
This video makes the heavy accusation that Israel is in fact an apartheid state.
Which it is. I mean, like, there is a legal definition for the term apartheid. It fits that definition. There's also, I mean, and even before that, and, like, the people who fought against apartheid in South Africa have, like, one by one, have, gone to Palestine and been like, holy shit, this is actually worse than the horrible shit we fought against.
But is it true? It's really important to get the bigger picture of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and our 5-minute video does just that.
Maybe you've heard someone say that Israel is an apartheid state, that Israel has a policy of segregating and oppressing the minority population.
Well, minority population isn't quite right. First of all, why is everybody blue? What the fuck? What are these Smurfs? It's the indigenous population, and the only reason they're in the minority is because first Israel kicked out 750,000 of them in 1948. then drew the line, a green line, or like arbitrarily, just to ensure that they had this settler majority, and even that hasn't been enough to actually maintain a majority
within its borders, like South Africa once did. Maybe you've been so outraged by this information that you have considered joining the BDS movement, the effort to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel until it ends its alleged racist policies. I don't blame you. Apartheid is a great evil and deserves to be fought where...
Well, okay, she's a South African human rights activist. Let's look her up. Olga Michaud. Who is she? DC International. Who the fuck are they? An investment company on Vosloorus, South Africa. Oh, it is a literal... she's not a human rights activist. This is defend, embrace, invest in, support Israel. It is a South African-based Christian pro-Israel advocacy group. So, like, she's not a human rights activist. She's literally the opposite of a human rights activist. She is an anti-human rights activist. South African human rights activist. My ass.
Wherever we find it. But here's the thing. You won't find apartheid in the state of Israel. So, I'll put it bluntly. The BDS movement is a slick propaganda effort built on lies.
You mean kind of like calling yourself a human rights activist when you are literally not that thing? Is the a slick propaganda effort built on lies? You're on PragerU right now. That's kind of a slick propaganda effort built on lies.
I think I have the credibility to make this claim. Having grown up in South Africa and having spent...
Okay, she has the credibility to make this... Okay, let's see, how... When... Do we have her birth date? LinkedIn. Club Z. Like, I'm curious. Okay. Regent University. Okay, so this is, she's been involved in right-wing shit since she was in university. She went to fucking Regent University, which is a far-right fundamentalist Christian fake university.
A fair amount of time in Israel. I know what apartheid is and what it is not. My parents were raised under real apartheid, where blacks were, by law, separated from whites at every level, from education to drinking fountains.
Okay, so this is what's called petty apartheid, which happens to be in many ways the most visible because you have the signs saying like, net blancus and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it is not the overall thing. It is part of it. But the bigger picture was what was called relocation. Created these fake-ass homelands, like Bophuthatswana, and they just sort of, like, took all the indigenous population out of the lands that the white settlers wanted, dumped them in these places, and then claimed they were sovereign countries, and... denied them representation in the political system.
Blacks couldn't vote, couldn't own land.
Okay, so far we're not... These are similarities. Most Palestinians can't vote either in Israel. They also can't own land because the Jewish Agency controls most of the land within Israel. And the Jewish Agency is not, by its charter, is not allowed to make land available to people who are not of Jewish ethnicity.
Couldn't live next to or use the same transportation system as whites.
Well, isn't it embarrassing to your argument that just recently a whole bunch of Palestinians were forced to get off of a bus so that Jews could take their seats?
I remember my father telling me about how my grandfather was kicked and humiliated in public by a young white boy.
You mean sort of like what happens with the when the settlers in the West Bank decide that they're gonna fuck with Palestinians who are just trying to take their kids to school or harvest their fucking olives? You mean the stuff that happens literally every fucking day?
All he was permitted to say was, "Please stop, little boss."
You mean, okay, so you keep on listing all these. When are we going to get to the differences, though? You said that it's totally different. You're describing, like, literally, you're describing all the fucking similarities.
That was the world my family lived in.
That's the world Palestinians live in, except with the addition that a fucking high-tech Air Force bombs them regularly. And this is precisely why people who actually fought against apartheid, who, you know, in South Africa, said at the time, you know, our freedom isn't complete. I mean, Mandela, for example, said our freedom isn't complete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Plenty of other people who are in the struggle have said since then that what Israel does, you know, no matter how as bad as, you know, apartheid South Africa was, they weren't sending the Air Force to bomb Soweto.
That was the world of apartheid South Africa. But in Israel, the law is colorblind. Israeli Arabs have the same right.
Okay, see, that's cute. See, they say Israeli Arabs because the idea is to pretend that the Palestinians inside the Green Line are somehow fundamentally different ethnicity than the Palestinians on the other side of it.
Rights as Israeli Jews.
That's actually also not true. For example, if a Palestinian citizen of Israel marries a Palestinian who's not a citizen of Israel, solely because she's a Palestinian and he's a Palestinian, she cannot use that in order to get permission to live within the Green Line with the Palestinian citizen of Israel she just married. If, on the other hand, if they were both Jewish, this doesn't even come up because Jews literally have a pretty much automatic right to citizenship in Israel, just waiting for them. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. Why is everybody fucking blue?
They ride the same buses, study in the same schools,
And actually, this is all very much not true.
and are treated in the same hospitals.
Also not true. In fact, Palestinians have to get permission in order to... Like, for one thing, most Palestinians live in the green... see, what she's doing, this is literally the apartheid strategy as well. I have to back up because this is really deep. Because the way that South Africa, under the apartheid regime, claimed that they weren't violating the equality rights of the indigenous black population was they said, oh, you know, you're talking about people in Bophuthatswana. That's Bophuthatswana. That's another fucking country. That's totally different. Of course they can't vote in our elections. They're in a different country. You know, of course they're not, you know, entitled to the same civil rights as citizens of the Union of South Africa because they're in a different country that we made up specifically so that we could deny them their rights. And that is literally what she's doing here. She is using a bullshit distinction specifically used in order to do racism more effectively and saying, okay, we don't have to even deal with the rest of the Palestinians who are outside the Green Line. Because that's a whole different thing. That's nothing to do with these Israeli Arabs.
Arabs are elected to Israel's parliament.
And practically every election there is an attempt to ban all of the Palestinian parties.
Serve as judges and fight in the Israeli military.
Actually, most of them don't because the Israeli military does not really want them.
On my first trip to Israel, the group I was with had a Jewish tour guide and an Arab bus driver. Imagine our surprise having heard that Israel is an apartheid state.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you were totally surprised by this, the fucking junket that you probably organized from... Yeah, I mean, this is Israel's whole propaganda thing. They're like, hey, look, you know, they're Israeli Arabs and they're getting along with, you know, Israeli Jews and it's all cool. I mean, this is their whole message. That of course they...
This would have been inconceivable in apartheid South Africa.
That's not true, actually. There was what was called the Rebel Tour of South Africa. See, South Africa under the apartheid regime was cut off from international sporting events. But they kind of wanted to do international sporting events. They wanted to get the big names, in cricket, for example, to come to South Africa. And so they approached cricketers, particularly in the teams that did not pay very well, like the West Indies, and said, here, we'll pay you a whole lot of money if you play a tour of South Africa, even though the ICC, the International Cricket Conference, tells you you're not allowed to. And since and what they did was they actually told because they're talking to the West Indies team, because that was like the hottest team in the 1980s, and so they said, and the West Indies team is black. Like I mean it's an almost all black. Back then I think it was an all black team. These days it isn't exclusively. There are people of South Asian descent as well, and so obviously they were somewhat and going to South Africa and you're being invited to South Africa and you're black sounds like something that might be a little bit like you might be a bit concerned about it. And they said, no, don't worry about that. We're not going to do anything bad to you. You're going to be honorary whites for the duration of the tour. And it's like, just so we can show that actually we treat black people really well. I mean, they did the exact same shit. They used the exact same lines. The only difference is they didn't say it isn't apartheid, because they invented the term thinking that that would actually make everything sound better.
All these things would be self-evident to anyone who did any kind of actual research, or even better, visited Israel.
Okay. The thing is, I have Palestinian friends who still aren't actually allowed to do that just because they're Palestinians. Whereas I, who have no connection to that country at all, just because I've got a Jewish mother, can just go over there, and the government will pay me money in order to take Palestinians' land, and they will even just let me have a passport without all that much bureaucracy. So yeah, there is kind of a little bit of racism. And the thing about doing minimum research when you are like pretending, cosplaying a human rights activist, is you don't want to encourage people to do research, because then they look you up and it's like, oh wow, you're just a pro-Israel shill. That's your whole thing.
Something I encourage everyone to do. BDS doesn't want you to research or visit Israel.
Well, we don't. Yeah, the Palestinian BDS campaign specifically doesn't want people to visit Israel because that drives tourist dollars to Israel, and Israel's actually kind of dependent on that stuff. And the idea is to starve them of funds. They do want you to research. I mean, they'll give you all sorts of, there's plenty, because the thing is, the minute you actually look into just even the mainstream international organizations like the UN, and totally mainstream human rights groups like Amnesty International or even Human Rights Watch, which is practically a subsidiary of the US State Department, outright say, it's apartheid.
It depends on the ignorance of its audience. Sadly, on American college campuses, BDS has a significant presence.
Why the fuck is everybody blue?
It succeeds by playing on the good intentions of good people through deliberate deception.
You mean sort of like calling yourself a human rights activist when you've never done any human rights activism?
In short, they lie. And lies really make me angry because lies empower.
These lies are my fucking job.
Evil. Lies about blacks empowered apartheid in South Africa.
Lies about Palestinians empower apartheid in Israel.
Lies about Jews made the Holocaust possible. And lies about Israel are misleading a lot of good-hearted young people into opposing the only country in the entire Middle East that doesn't segregate and oppress its minority population.
Except that it literally does those things.
Just ask the next Egyptian Copt or Iraqi Christian you meet on campus.
Oh, okay, so there's a classic thing, a classic article by Jews Sans Frontières that talks about making the case for Israel and winning. It's a satire, but they say, here's what you got to do. First you say, we're awesome, and you talk about how great Israel actually is. And then you say, everybody else sucks. And there's a whole order to this, because the idea is if people aren't convinced that Israel is awesome, well, then you have to move on to the next step, and the next step is to claim that everybody else sucks, and that therefore Israel by default is just the better option. I mean, and who actually has been controlling Iraq for quite a long time? And by the way, Egypt is one of Israel's closest fucking allies.
So the question people should really be asking is, what does the BDS movement want?
And the BDS movement actually specifically says it's easy. Tear down the apartheid wall, and end to the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, full equal rights for the indigenous population, and a right to return for the refugees. I mean, it's kind of a thing. They're kind of explicit about it specifically because it's a thing. That's what the BDS movement wants.
The answer is simple. They want to destroy Israel.
But wait, I mean, the only way... So you're saying that a demand for equal rights would destroy Israel? That sounds like you're saying that Israel cannot exist unless it denies equal rights, which is specifically... I remember earlier in this video you were trying to make the point that that wasn't an issue. Because, I mean, it's interesting that they use this line. Because their whole thing is that supposedly Israel provides equal rights. Well, the demand is for equal rights. So, should they just say they've already done that? Instead, they say equal rights will destroy Israel.
They can't do it militarily, so they try to do it through lies. They say that Jews have no historic claim to Israel. Lie. They say that Israel treats its Arabs as second-class citizens.
True. Well, actually, yeah, I mean, the thing is, well, it's Arabs, first of all. Fuck off. These are people who lived there for centuries, and the country you're defending is barely older than a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label.
Lie. They say that Israel doesn't want peace with
yeah, that's true. Israel very clearly doesn't want
its Arab
peace.
neighbors. Lie.
Those Arab neighbors include the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and Israel hasn't been very peaceful towards them.
If you tell lies and you tell them often enough, people who don't know the truth start to believe them.
Yes, and that is the entire thinking behind PragerU.
The BDS movement's leaders barely tried to hide the charade. They will lie and say that they only want a Palestinian state living...
That's actually not one of the BDS demands. Like, there are 4 fucking demands. They're explicit. You can go to the BDS campaign website and you'll find those demands. They are prominent because the demands themselves actually kind of diffuse a lot of these talking points.
Living side by side with Israel. And then they say this: we oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine.
Well, yes, because the thing is that the only reason... I mean, first of all, Israel's not a Jewish state. It is a Zionist state. The idea that it's a Jewish state is just anti-Semitic bullshit, because it's the idea is to equate Israel with all Jews. Zionists love to do this, and it's anti-Semitic, and it doesn't become less anti-Semitic because Zionists love to do it. The thing is that the only claim Israel has to being a Jewish state is that Jews have more legal rights than anyone else in that state, including the indigenous population who've lived there for centuries.
Ending the occupation doesn't mean anything if it doesn't mean upending the Jewish state itself.
I wonder if there was anything in that ellipsis that might have provided some context. Okay. We have nothing but right-wing organizations even mentioning this quote. And these ellipses are all over the place. Okay. Okay, here we go. Ending. So, let me just see, how do they... Okay. So what we're finding is these seems this ellipsis suggests that these two things are from one quote, but let me see. Any part. Yeah, okay, these are separate things. I mean, this is not one quote that they've ellipsed something. This is two things that are cobbled together from two totally different sources. Okay, this is from an article by Ahmed Moore, upending. I view the BDS movement as a long-term project with radically transformative potential. I believe the ultimate success of the BDS movement will be coincident with the ultimate success of Palestinian enfranchisement and equal rights movement. In other words, BDS is not another step on the way to the final showdown. BDS is the final showdown. This belief grows directly from the conviction that nothing resembling the two-state solution will ever come into being. Ending the occupation doesn't mean anything if it doesn't mean upending the Jewish, sick, state itself. That's because, as Yair Wallach writes, the occupation appears increasingly as de facto permanent feature of the Israeli system of government, rather than as a set of temporary policies and security measures, and inevitably the occupation involves the disenfranchisement and denial of collective political rights for the Palestinians. So, this is literally, this isn't a quote. This isn't one person necessarily even saying this. We oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Let me see, where do we get that? We oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Yeah, that is from... Okay. Omar Barghouti. But the other thing is from fucking Amir Moore. Amir... Yeah, this is... And apparently, again, surprisingly enough, it turns out Omar Barghouti does not consider the way that his words have been characterized to be particularly accurate. And considering that it's all fucking right-wing groups that are using that fucking quote, I can kind of see why. So, in short, this is not an Omar Barghouti quote. The first part is a part of an Omar Barghouti quote. The second part is from a completely different source, written by a completely different person. And, by the way, fun fact, let's see. When did he say this? Okay. Okay, get this. This is from 2019. The article that has the second part here is from 2010. This is 2019. Omar Barghouti. This other thing, 2010, by... See here? April 22, 2010, Ahmed Moore. So, not only that, the chronology is a lie. This is not just not a quote from one person. It's not just not a quote from one source. This was written in 2019 by Omar Barghouti. This was written in 2010 by Ahmed Moore. You literally cannot find this treated as a single quote, except in fucking far-right sources that are lying.
That's from Omar Barghouti. No,
it isn't.
A founder
you fucking liar.
of BDS. Barghouti lives in Israel. So you might expect that he said this from inside an Israeli prison, like Nelson Mandela during South Africa apartheid.
And Israel repeatedly has threatened to lock him up.
You would be wrong. Barghouti is a PhD student at Israel's Tel Aviv University, where he enjoys the same rights as every Israeli.
No, he doesn't. And okay, yes. And he...
The only dream of that kind of freedom.
Yeah, and he gets a piece. He's a Palestinian citizen of Israel.
Is Israel a perfect country? No. There are as many perfect countries as there are perfect people. But to call it an apartheid state is not only an insult to the only democracy in the Middle East.
The only democracy if you don't count the roughly half of the population who aren't allowed to vote.
And the only country with equal rights for all its minorities.
That's actually not true.
It's also an insult to the actual victims of apartheid.
Yeah, which is why I find it interesting that so many actual people who actually fought against apartheid, who actually had fucking blood, sweat, and tears into that struggle, have been the ones to point it out, like Desmond Tutu, for example, like Ronnie Kasrils, quite a few others. I mean, Mandela himself, for fuck's sake.
Like my parents, and all those who suffered under it. I'm Olga Mishra for Prager University.
Oh god. Yeah, okay, so that's done, and actually, it is 10 minutes after our normal ending time. Hola, Oscar. Qué pena que llegué justamente al momento en que estamos terminando ya. Pero... te perdiste una... Bueno, seguimos con la franja del rechazo y también con esa canción de mierda que nos pasa a Chile. Pero... Bueno... voy a cerrar para ahora. We're gonna just... I have to end because I have people who are trying to sleep upstairs and stuff. But thank you to everybody who came. I'll be back next week at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I will be back throughout the week on hyperpolyglotting with the Duolingo speedrun.